This week, we're going to be jumping back into our diorama series with this awesome explosive fireball diorama. Cool thing about it, it also doubles as a modular piece of terrain as well. Now, I'm going to be using my Anycubic Photon Mono in this video, jumping into some 3D printing with some awesome custom-made miniatures by TigerSkullRPG. That's this week on Tabletop Witchcraft. Hey there, and welcome back to Tabletop Witchcraft. This week, we're going to make an awesome-looking diorama of this spellcaster launching a fireball across the battlefield and blowing up a whole bunch of bad guys. Now, a few weeks back, I got an Anycubic Photon Mono 3D printer and the wash and cure station, and I've been having a lot of fun printing all kinds of stuff off with it. So I went online to find some miniatures I could print off with it for the diorama that were some orcs or goblins being blown up by some type of explosion. And I was having a hard time finding anything. So I reached out to Alex over at TigerSkullRPG. I ran the idea past him, and what he came up with was absolutely amazing. He crushed it, nailed it. And so we used his miniatures in the video for the diorama. And a really cool feature about the diorama is that it actually comes apart and you can use half of it for playable modular terrain for your game sessions. Now, if you want to win a set of plans for this diorama, all you have to do is like the video and leave a comment down below as to what you liked in the video. And follow me on Instagram, because in my story over there is where I'll announce the winner next Friday. Alright, if you're ready, let's go grab some supplies and let's get crafting. Okay, so for this build, we're going to start off with 3 blocks of 2-inch XPS foam. Now, you know I like using hot glue. I don't like to wait for wood glue or tacky glue to set up when I'm working with something like this. So you can see I just use a very thin amount of hot glue and it allows me to keep working. We're going to take these 3 pieces of 2-inch XPS foam and shave off 1 inch off the bottom. Then for the remainder, we're going to use a circle jig to cut out this diameter circle here in the middle for the tower on the diorama. Then we'll do the same and cut it out for the bottom as well. Okay, now this little Pac-Man piece is going to be added to the exterior of the diorama just to give it a little bit more dimension. It's going to be the base for the tower. Now, a cool little tip, you'll see I'm using my pinky right here to shut off the Proxon, and I'm freehanding this kind of for the most part, and we can slide the high fence back up along there. Once we have everything set, turn the heat back on, and we can make a nice continuous cut to make that 90-degree angle. Now we're just using a 5x5 piece of foam for the diorama, and using the plans we can make sure that we have everything right dimension wise, and we're going to put that piece right into place right there. Now we're going to be using this Anycubic. I can't wait, a little bit later on in the video, but again we're going back to the circle jig to cut out another 3-inch diameter cylinder out of the middle of the tower. Now placing this back in the plans, we want to bring the tower into the build a little bit, so I'm coming into the build by about maybe half an inch. Now this is really up to you how you want your tower to look. I'm basically just drawing out the shape of the ruined part of the top of the tower, then using an X-Acto knife to cut all that out. And don't worry about ripping and tearing. We're going to hit this up really hard with a texturing tool in a few minutes. Now we're going to add this centerpiece because we want to have the tower have a few steps leading up into it. And as you can see, if a little piece pops off, no big deal. Just use a little hot glue to put it right back in place. But for the most part, this held together really nice with that hot glue. Now for the last step going up into the tower, I want it really deteriorated, so that's what we did there in that last piece. Then going to the plans, we can get the stencil cut out for the windows. And try and have one of the windows cut in half, as you can see here, with the broken piece of the tower. Then using what I like to call a foam sculpting tool, but it's really a clay sculpting tool, I cut out about maybe 1/8 of an inch into the foam to add some dimension. And make sure you do that to the exterior as well. Okay, now we want to add some stones to the exterior of this piece. And a really cool way of doing it is to just freehand the stones on and then really kind of gouge out and have chunks of it come apart as you're working on it. It's really tough to make a solid flat piece of XPS foam look like it has like 3 dimensions, as if you used individual bricks. But I find using this tool that I made here, I'll put a link up above to a video that describes this a little bit more. We can really gouge out and sand down some of the stones, and as you can see right here, we can use the tip of it to really push hard, and I mean really hard, into the foam to help hold that shape. Now we add just a little bit of hot glue only to the part that you saw there. These 2 steps are glued together, and now we're going to glue that right to the tower. And again, you can see the versatility of this tool to really deteriorate the steps as well. We want to try to avoid as many 90-degree angles as we can on this build. And don't be afraid about being rough with it when you're working with it. Now we're going to go down about 1/8 of an inch around the entire top of the 5 by 5 inch piece of foam. And then I'm going to add some large rectangular blocks to the top of the craft here. And again, you can see along all the edges, I'm going to push in really hard. I'm not worried about having indents into this. It's going to make it look like these were individually placed. Now going back to what I just said about having no 90-degree angles, I'm keeping the texturing tool away from the little paver section, that little 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch piece of foam on the top, but I'm rounding out the stones that would be the foundation to this piece of the ruins. You can see right there, you don't want it to look like a 90-degree angle. You want them to be nice and round like these 2 corners. Now I just cut up some blocks, threw them in a little tumbler that I made with some rocks, shake those up, and those will be all set for this portion of the build. Now I'm just taking some copper wire. I cut the top off at an angle so that it's nice and sharp, and it's kind of hard to avoid when you're pushing these foam blocks on the top of the foam to pop out. You can use that clay sculpting tool in the background once you know where they're gonna pop out to poke a little hole in the top, and it will keep them together a little bit better. Now alternating these stones, you can see once we make another popsicle stick out of them right here, or a little kebab, you can see how they fit together real nice. You want to do that 4 times, fit all 4 together, then add some hot glue and press these right into place. And it's nice to have something on hand like a little hammer or some wire cutters like this to tap those right down into place. Now this was really awesome because I initially thought about just gluing all these bricks together, and I really wanted some of them to have a really exploded look, like it's just about to topple over. And that would be really hard to do with any glue, like tacky glue or PVA glue, let alone hot glue even. So what we do here is we put this copper rod or wire through it, and it allows us to bend them to the exact shape that we want. And we'll go back in later on with some tacky glue and some sand to cover up any rod that might be showing. So I'm just using an old paintbrush right here. I use this for, basically any types of glue washes or anything that I gotta do. And I'm just pressing it into these holes. Now I'm not worried about getting glue or sand on the outside because this thing is exploding. There's mortar going everywhere, chunks of rock. All we're looking to do now is just cover up the wire that's on the inside. Now you're going to want to cover up any cracks around the circumference of this tower. Super easy, a little bit of tacky glue, some sand, and then we add some of these rocks. Making sure to go back with more sand over the rocks when we're done so that you don't have any smooth lumps of glue, which would not look good. Now what we want to do is draw out like a little, the original Batman kapow or boom symbol over this thing. And we're going to gouge out a section for our impact of the fireball. Alright, now, don't go anywhere. What I want to do is slowly start introducing some electronics into the channel. We're going to start real simple right now with just wiring in a switch into this LED strip. Throughout the course of this year, I'm going to add a little bit more and more, I guess, difficult wiring techniques into this, but I promise to make them as easy as possible because it really opens up a lot of cool and exciting doors for you when it comes to crafting. So all we want to do is strip a little piece of that protective coating off the positive portion, which is the red section of the wire on the LED strip. And following this little diagram up top, we're going to solder the red positive to the leftmost little tab on that switch. And then on the next switch right next to it, we're going to solder the other portion of the red wire going to the LED strip, making sure not to get any of that solder touching. There we have it. All you got to do is plug that battery in and we got a working switch and you're well on your way to electronics in the world of crafting. Alright, back to our foam build now. So what we need to do is cut out a few compartments for the battery, for the switch, and some lines for the wiring. And I tried to get really exact, as you can see right here, for the switch and the wires, and it didn't really work out. I ended up going in here and just kind of cutting a big area out to run everything. In the future, what I'll do is I'll mount the switches to some chipboard and then glue that piece of chipboard to the craft. Now, what I'm doing here is cutting out a section in the bottom to fit the battery pack through. Now, once that's all complete, we can spray this down with a little bit of alcohol, it's rubbing alcohol, and then a little bit of a glue wash. You can see I'm using that brush again to paint on glue to make sure that this sand does not come off. Alright, now these are the paints that we're going to use for the tower. And you can see I was real sporadic with the color. I've got some brown. I'm kind of just doing a light dry brush over the whole thing with some white. And don't worry about, having patchy look to the whole thing. When you do your black wash over this, it's going to really bring all the colors together. I used to worry about this, and now I have a lot of fun when I'm working with stone, really kind of just going for it. Now when it comes to adding flocking for moss, I like to use some paint, some ink, both green and black, and a little thinner to paint where I'm going to put the moss. And then I like to touch up a few areas with a little bit of watered down Agrax Earthshade. When we add our flocking, it's going to make a nice base for the flocking, kind of feathering it out into the stone. Now this is what I use for the flocking and the pigments here. You can see I'm using multiple different colors, and not only colors, but coarse and fine as well. Now when we craft, it's all about layers, right? So if I was to just take some light green turf and put it over this section right here, it would look okay, but you gotta admit it looks a lot better when you have 3 or 4 different colors of flocking, and not only colors but textures. It really makes it come alive and makes it look like this stuff is growing on the rock. So I like to work in layers not only in foam but in flocking, paint, and so on. Okay, now for the pigments, I love using pigments when I'm working with stone. I mixed some Vallejo black and burnt umber together, and I'm just putting this on the floor. I'm putting it around the ledge on the windows, on the broken piece of the top of the tower. And once we have that on, we're going to lock it all in place with a little bit of pigment fixer. And you don't need a lot of this. I like to just put a drop on the heaviest part of the pigment, and by capillary action it kind of just works its way out. Now we get to go back to our LEDs, and I'm using this Bombay ink. It's a orange ink, and I'm going to use just a little bit over each LED. I'm going to turn the light off here in a minute, and it's going to really knock down that blue cool color to a nice orange. Alright, now we need a way to contain this fireball. And we could glue this whole thing together, but that might be a mess and might actually be an issue down the road. So what I'm going to do is create a little cage in the shape of the fireball, not only the blast, but the fireball coming in from the spellcaster. So in my left hand is going to be the round portion of the cage, and my right hand is going to be that section of it leading in. And you want to be careful working with this stuff. You can really scratch and cut yourself up pretty quickly working with this wire. Okay, so now I've got 2 LED strips. They got that orange painted over all the LEDs, and I'm just wrapping them up in a ball. These LED strips that I have a sticky backing to them, so you can see you can pull it off right here to help hold it in place. It's not strong enough to hold it together. I use a little bit of glue for that, but really that cage is what's going to hold it all together really nice. Okay, so you can see I'm kind of feeding the lead portion of the LED through the top. I'm bending out some of that wire, it was in the way, and I'm just going to pop that LED ball right into place and just working with it to make sure that the LED strip in my right hand is on the top of the fireball. We're all set and ready to go. You can see just how bright this is going to be. Alright, here we go. We're jumping into the 3D portion of this video, and I'm really excited because I've been messing around with my Anycubic Photon Mono now for about a week, and it only took maybe 20 minutes to set up. It's super intuitive, and it's very easy if you've got pre-supported files, because that's what I've been messing with so far, to get them up and running. I'm going to show you just how fast it is to take a file like that, put it into that software, get it over the printer, and get something printing. So, all we got to do is grab our file that we've purchased, open it up, and you can see right away we can manipulate the file just to kind of see what we're going to be printing here. And all you have to do is, if it's pre-supported, hit this slice button down here, give it a name, hit save, and I'm all set. It's going to convert the file into the file format that the 3D printer needs. I can upload it to a thumb drive, stick it into the 3D printer, and I'm good to go. Once this is done converting the file, a really cool feature, it's going to give you a rough estimate as to how much resin you're going to use and the time. So this one mini is going to take about 2 hours to print and use just under 6 milliliters of resin. So we're going to save it, and then next stop, we're going to hit the printer. Alright, now I'm going to show you real quick what you have to do to get this up and running. I'm going to grab some of this UV resin from Anycubic, and you should be wearing this mask right here, but if I was wearing it, you wouldn't be able to hear me. So I'm sacrificing a little bit of myself to make this quick part of the video. So what you want to do is take some of this resin and fill the vat up. I'm going to do a couple of prints here, so I'm going to fill this up a little bit more than I actually need to. Put the protective cover over the top. Nitrile gloves to keep the resin off your hands. Now look how quick and easy this is. All I gotta do is take this flash drive, if I can find the hole back here, insert it into the printer, go to print, find the file I want that we saved over there on the computer, and hit play. That's it. It's printing. In 2 hours and 15 minutes, we're gonna have the miniature all ready to go. Alright, now that we're done printing, we're going to take this model on the plate, we're going to stick it into this tub right here to cure it, and what I'm using is this stuff right here. It's 95% ethanol, and we're just going to seal this up, place the protective covering over this, and you want to make sure that you're on wash now and not cure. And all you gotta do is turn this up to 10 minutes. And press it in on it and you're good to go. 10 minutes, your minute should be all washed up, and then we can hit it up with the cure. Alright, now that we're done washing the model, what we need to do is take the reflective plate that comes with the cure and wash station, place that on top, this little plate right here. And then we take our model, I took all the supports off of it, place it right in the middle. Get that protective cover back on top. This time we make sure we go from wash to cure. And I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. And just like that, we're all set. Once this is done, we're ready to start painting. Alright, so these are the awesome miniatures that Alex made from TigerSkullRPG. His files, if you pick them up, actually include a few others that I couldn't fit into this diorama, so make sure to head over to his website and check them all out. Now this is the fun part. We get to glue these right into place. The guy on the left, I used some tacky glue. He didn't hold in real nice. I ended up pulling him back off and using some hot glue like I did with this ragdoll type guy here on the right. Now the main part right here that you want to make sure you do is the lead portion from the sorcerer coming into the fireball. You can see it's a little cocked off to the right a little bit. You want to make sure to have it nice and straight right on top of the fireball so that it doesn't look kind of, off-centered once you're all done. Now this was awesome. I absolutely loved putting this guy on here. I essentially just stuck his right foot underneath some of that wire, added some hot glue, and I was just super excited to see him in place. Now I'm just taking a little bit of tacky glue and rubbing it over the wire cage so that when we place our cotton balls over it, it'll hold it on real nice. Now these cotton balls, I had taken some of that Bombay ink, but I used a yellow instead of the orange this time for my base. And I made sure to spray the left and right side. And you can see this cotton ball I left almost in little clumps, so it's nice and poofy for the explosion. This piece though, I unraveled the cotton ball so they were nice and straight. That way it would give more of the illusion of the fireball stream flying into where it impacts the stone. And make sure to cover up obviously the bottom of this as well. Okay, now one thing that really brought this together was the stone. You can see this piece right here was long and flat, like it was one of the flagstone pavers that were on the top. Now I'm going to add a bunch of chunks of stone, like that would be the base around this whole thing. I thought that really added to the believability of this whole thing exploding and rocks and boulders going everywhere, showing the true force of this fireball. Now to paint it up, I went back to the airbrush with some orange, and I'm not too worried about getting the orange on a little bit of the miniature or the stones. Trying not to do that, but I'm not worried if I do. Again, it acts almost as a little bit of an OSL effect. Now right here, I'm going to a crimson. It's a 3:1 crimson to black ink ratio to color up just the peaks of the fireball. And you want to make sure to touch up all these different areas. You don't want to saturate the cotton. You just want to hit the highlights. Alright, now I dumped all of that ink out of the airbrush. I didn't clean out the pot though, and I added just black to it now to add just a few little hints of black to the top of the explosion. And finally, we're going to glue with some super glue and accelerant one sword to this guy's hand. I thought it was a final touch that looked totally awesome, and this is ready for your display. Wait a minute, John. What about my modular piece of terrain? Okay, so for the modular portion of this, all you gotta do is add a couple of magnets to the corner sections of the diorama, and you wanna do the same to the tower as well. That's gonna make that piece stick together, just like this. But to make it modular, pull it apart, and real simple. Just make yourself a set of stairs with some magnets as well on the corners, paint it up the exact same way we did the rest of the diorama. Now you can pull this apart and use it in all your tabletop games. So I really enjoyed working on this diorama. The pre-supported files from TigerSkullRPG were awesome. I had no failures when I was printing them on the Anycubic Photon Mono. And I got into a real groove using the wash and cure station and the 3D printer, kind of having two things going at once. And, the software was really awesome to use as well. Now, if you want to pick up the STL files for the miniatures that you saw in this video, or if you want some print on demand if you don't have a 3D printer, you can do that over at TigerSkullRPG.com. For the entire month of March, if you enter in all caps, Witchcraft 50, you'll get 50% off any STL files you get on his site. So make sure to visit his Patreon. While you're over there, check out my Patreon as well. It's support over there that really helps fund the channel, and I appreciate anything that you can do. All right, until next time, I'll see you around.